Why is the president always weaponizing people's pain? These families are grieving here at this ceremony. That pain is real. That loss is real. No one with a conscience would look at a mother who lost her child and feel anything but sympathy. But pay attention to what Donald Trump does. Every time there's a tragedy, every time a family stands at a podium with tears in their eyes, somehow it turns into a political stage or a rally. That also happens here at this ceremony. President Trump participates in Angel Family's remembrance ceremony. Not just remembrance, not just prayer, not just honor. He presents blame, elections, media attacks, border statistics, applause lines. Why does he do that? Because grief is powerful. It lowers our defenses. It makes people emotional. It makes them angry. And when people are emotional and angry, they're easier to manipulate, easier to mobilize. I'm not criticizing any of these families. Their heartbreak is beyond debate. But I am questioning the pattern because this wasn't just a memorial, it was choreography. One by one, grieving parents stepped forward. Watch. The room clapped. The president pivots. Political enemies are named. The press is attacked. Claims about stolen elections are inserted into this ceremony that was supposed to be a somber thing. That's not by accident, that's strategy on this administration's part. When he says these deaths are preventable, listen closely to what that means. It's not a detailed policy breakdown. It's not a discussion about how immigration courts function or how federal and local law enforcement intersect. It's a clear emotional message. This happened because of my opponents, because of Biden or Obama or any number of people that he has grievances against. That framing simplifies a complicated system into a villain. It creates a straight line between tragedy and political blame. And that line is powerful, especially when you're telling grieving parents that their children would still be alive if an election had gone differently. Think about the weight of that. Think about what this president is saying. He's tying your loss to a ballot box. You're telling them the reason they're standing there is political betrayal. That may energize supporters, but it also turns grief into permanent political fuel. Notice how quickly his tone shifts. One moment is candles and names, the next is media corruption and election fraud. Ask yourself honestly, what does a rigged election have to do with honoring victims? Why introduce that here in this sacred ceremony? Because it binds tragedy to grievance. It reinforces loyalty. It keeps anger alive. Then there's the language that he uses. Broad strokes about criminals pouring in, about foreign nations dumping their worst into this country. Are there violent criminals who cross borders? Of course they are. Should they be prosecuted and deported? Of course they should, absolutely. But violent crime in the United States is overwhelmingly committed by American citizens. That context matters. It doesn't erase these tragedies. It doesn't dismiss these families. It simply adds perspective. If the goal is truly public safety, truly, then the conversation would be wider than it is, more broader, more complex. We'd be talking about domestic violence prevention, gun access, mental health systems, community policing, judicial reform. But instead, the spotlight stays fixed on immigration because it's politically useful. It's easier to rally people around an external threat to confront internal complexity. And when religion enters the framework, when the debate becomes a spiritual battle between good and evil, it hardens everything. Compromise becomes weakness. Disagreement becomes moral failure. That deepens division. It turns policy into righteousness and righteousness into applause. Look at this room. Applause during what is supposed to be mourning, smiles, smiling, fun. Political punches thrown during what is supposed to be remembrance. That contrast tells you what this really is. If this were purely about honoring victims, it would stay there. Names, stories, silence. Instead, it expands into campaign themes, into attacks and grievances. We can debate immigration policy. We can argue about border enforcement. We can disagree about sanctuary cities. That's democracy. But we should not normalize using grieving families as emotional backdrops for political messaging. Because once leaders learn how effective tragedy is at mobilizing people, it never stops. This president never stops grieving about something. Every incident becomes narrative. Every victim becomes symbolism. Every tear becomes momentum. Pain should unite our country. It should push us towards solutions, not deepen the line between us. And the uncomfortable question we have to sit with is this: are we solving problems here, or are we keeping people angry and aggrieved because anger wins and grievances win elections? There's a difference between governing and campaigning. I wish this president would figure out which one is which. When memorials start sounding like rallies, we need to be honest about which one we're watching. And only this president does this. This is trash.